Hello, everybody. Thank you all for joining us for the ninth lecture of Game Production Masterclass. Today with us is Saeed, and he will talk about asset creation. And before we go on, to tell a little bit more about him and what he will talk today, I'm just gonna quickly again thank all of our sponsors and the partners that help this project bring to life. And first of all, I would like to thank Platform Center for Creativity, which this project is part of, and it's co-financed by European Union and European Regional Fund, and also by Republic of Slovenia. And we are also sponsored by Outfit 7 and Criterion, which are companies from our game development industry. And I also like to thank our partner Serveris and Slovenia Games, who created and made this project happen. As always, I will also share notes that you can take in between the talk and have collaborative experience. And let's just jump right into it. So Saeed is a PhD candidate at TU Graz, and he's working mostly with the VR and researching how to do user experience in that kind of field. And he's also a technical artist, and he also is one of founders. Is it founders or also creators of VR giants?
Developers right now, yeah. A technical artist in theirs, yeah.
Okay. So yeah, and today he will be talking about asset creation, and he gonna lead us through the whole pipeline, how to create some 3D assets and how then to import them into some game engine. And without further ado, I will just give the word to Saeed.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Hey everyone, I'm Saeed, and as Rock mentioned, I'm technical artist and also researcher at Graz University of Technology. Today we will talk about asset gathering and creation pipeline in general. My presentation will be divided into the two main parts. The first part, we will have a traditional type of presentation as a PowerPoint that I will discuss how to gather some assets if you need. And after that, we will overview the workflow of creating something as a 3D asset. In that part, I'm not going into the 2D asset creation because it's a totally different approach, but I think it would be useful for all of you to know a little bit about the 3D asset creation pipeline. Then let's dig into it. Okay, yeah, perfect. In general, the assets is a common term in game development and in game industries for different type of objects that we can use in our game project. Either 3D models, 2D sprites, textures, audio file, visual VFX, or any type of particle system, and also some kind of scripts or plugins that we can use inside our projects. However, some people do not consider scripts as assets, but yeah, you can find scripts in many asset stores as files that you can use. However, considering the assets and the way that you want to use it, you should consider two main workflows. Either you want to gather them or you want to create them. There is a big difference between these two approaches, and you should consider your team and the members that you have and the profession that you already have in your team to consider which part you would like to go for it. For example, if you do not have a 3D modeler in your team, you need to gather assets from the asset stores. However, it's not my recommendation because, yeah, you cannot copy the visuals from the other assets and say, okay, it's my game and let's play it. Or if you do not have a good high quality programmer, then you need to take some plugins for some specific parts of your game. Or if you do not have a music producer or you do not have a special effects specialist, you need to download something. And it's the gathering procedure. But if you already have enough expertise in your team, or you are planning to learn them in future, you could go for asset creation. For the first part, as asset gathering, the important point is you should think about which tool you are using or which game engine you're using at the starting point. The two famous ones are Unreal Engine and Unity. Both of them have same almost approach to the assets, but the stores that they are using to providing their original asset are different. Also, there are other game engines like Unigen that recently becomes free also for communities, and it has good options, but not as big as the other two. Or even the CryEngine that we heard probably that in the next years we will hear about Crisis 4 and maybe the new release of it, or a new asset store even for it. But we will focus mainly today on Unreal Engine and Unity. The asset store for Unity is called exactly Unity Asset Store, and it's almost the biggest asset store for the game assets. I will quickly go into it and share with you the information that you can get from the website and what points are important when you are going into it. It's a Unity Asset Store website, and as you see, always there are some, not always, but usually there are some offers that you can consider. And by searching for the asset, you can find your asset. For example, one of the famous assets is Amplify Shader. When you click on the asset, the web page for the asset will be opened. There are some maybe present there are some pictures that shows the application of this asset, and also there are some information about the price that is either free or you should pay for it, and also the offers. Also, there is a refund policy that if the asset is not live up with the billing that you expect, you can refund it. It's a little bit time consuming, but it works. It's not a big deal. One of the important parts that you should check is support Unity versions. I can say one of the problems that Unity has, it's there is a huge difference between the different version of Unity and different rendering pipelines. And it's very, very important when you're downloading or getting one asset from the asset store to consider this approach. Either you are using the standard rendering pipeline or scriptable rendering pipeline. It means HDRP and URP. You should always check whether this asset is already supporting them. For example, here we can see if this asset is supporting a high definition rendering pipeline and universal rendering pipeline. That's very good. Also, it's supporting every Unity version after 5.5. The other important things is latest release date. It means what's the latest update for this asset. If you find one asset that is not updated recently, maybe the developer of that asset will not support that much good. It means you should consider a little bit this asset more. The other things that I find interesting, as you know, it's a package content. You can open it to see what's already included in this package and information for some of the assets that are in there. For example, this one, I know that is mainly a plugin and script. It's not that much important to go into the each scripts because it's not shown, but you can see that's mainly made up scripts. But it also has some Unity packages as a samples. It means you can expect some samples from this asset. Always also check the reviewers and the comments and other stuff that you are familiar with them from the other stores. If I go back into the Unity first homepage, you can see also we have some other assets like 3D models by polygons that are very famous for the low poly assets. This type of assets, if you go to the package content, you will see it's mainly made of models, materials, some prefabs, some predefined scenes, and texture. It's totally different than previous assets, and you can expect what you see from it by simply go into this part. Okay, yeah. The next asset store is Unreal Engine Marketplace. That it's for Epic games, and you can use it for the Unreal Engine. I will also open this one and quickly discuss the things that you can see in there. Similar to Unity Asset Store, it has some assets, some offers. One of the good benefits of maybe the Unreal Engine Marketplace is a free content of the month, that every month on the first Tuesday of the month, you can expect some free asset that they are usually very expensive, maybe a couple of hundreds of euros. And yeah, you can take them for free and use in your project without any limitation. That's very good. For example, I will open this free asset of this month. That is a bakery shop. All of the models and the scene is usable. Similar to the Unity Asset Store, you can also expect here the versions that is supported. And by the release of Unreal Engine 5, you can also see that they are supported for some assets. One of the things that is not as good as Unity Asset Store, you cannot exactly see what's included in this asset, but usually the developers explain what you should expect from this asset. For example, 40 photo scanned food models. And you can always check it. You can also go to the free asset, the general free asset by Unreal, because it's included lots of assets that you can use inside your games, and many of them are very high quality assets. Okay. The next store that is recently becomes free for Unreal users is Quixel Megascans. If you check the video by Electronic Arts for the, I can show you this one, for the Star Wars Battlefront game, they explained that using the photo scanned or photogrammetry assets can improve the productivity of their workflow and can reduce the time that they need to make one asset significantly. It's the reason that recently thinking about photo scanned assets increased, and people are also prefer to use this type of asset more. And Epic started to make the Quixel Megascans free for all Epic for all Unreal Engine users, to make them to make it easier for them to access to such these assets. If you install Quixel Bridge, it's a tool like this. Inside the Quixel Bridge, you have access to all of the Quixel Megascans. They are already divided into the different categories. For example, it's a Heartland assets that by selecting each asset, you can see some information about it. For example, this asset, about the size of the asset, you can have some expectation in comparison to the human. You can see that this asset is open. It means if you rotate the asset from one side, you can. It's not a fully filled asset. It means you cannot rotate it in all the angles, but it's good because it has less polygons. If I want to tell you, it means when you look at it from this angle, there is and you have a one-sided material, you cannot see the asset. But if you find, for example, some closed assets, it's totally rotatable and you can use it in any angle. The other things that is important is resolution for the export of the asset, and also type of these assets here. You have access to lots of materials, 3D scans materials, with very high quality, that you can switch between the different maps of them to see how they implement it, and also easily download them and add them to your project. Also, if you're using Unreal Engine 5, you can directly use the Quixel Bridge inside the Unreal Engine 5 and export your asset directly from that Quixel Bridge into the Unreal Engine. Or if you are using the older version, you can use the plugins to export your asset into your tool from Unity to Blender and other tools. Also, using the photogrammetry asset is not limited to the realistic type of the game. If you even plan to go for the stylized game, you can take these assets and start to make them in such a way that they look like stylized. There is a very interesting presentation by Epic That's if I find it here. Yeah, they show that they exported one of these Quixel Megascans assets and start to modifying them to make them look like stylized. The result of this work is something like this that is not realistic anymore. In this work, they use also Quixel Mixer tool that maybe we'll discuss a little bit later about it in the texturing part. But it's a free tool by Quixel that you can use to paint the texture for your 3D models. Out of this main maybe asset stores, we can go for some areas that you can download the assets, but they are also have some learning content or some other areas that is beneficial for your work, mainly not directly for the assets, but they are related to the assets. For example, the ArtStation is one of the wonderful places to search for the idea, to gather the idea for your work. And also it has the marketplace to download or buy the assets, but it has also the learning content that can be very useful for your asset creation workflow. The other website that I recommend is 80.lv or 80 level that they are somehow a blog that posts quite often about different asset creation workflow, or they have interview with 3D artists and a different part of different game developers, and it's very interesting. Also, when you start to search on internet, you will reach to the Gumroad website that people can also put their assets in there and you can download, and some other asset stores. One of the places that you can easily find 3D models, that many of them are free to download, is sketchfab. The point is the assets in the sketchfab is not exactly categorized, or they are not exactly qualified to be usable in the game. It means you can export them for your game engine, but maybe they are too much polygon in there, or maybe the texture is not according to your expectation. But as a starting point, it's not so bad. You can always consider it and check what's in there, or just make them as a prototyping for yourself. And there are many assets in there, and there are a couple of, I think, millions of assets that you can find. And also you can buy some higher quality ones in there that is qualified already. If you plan to go for the actual game development, or maybe I can tell it in the other way, it's more commercial game development, it's the kit bash is also a good idea that you can download a kit bash of objects. It means you have a different set of objects that you can combine together and make new things, and make a new city, make a new object, make a new building, several things. When you select each one of them, you will see there is lots of assets included in each one, and you can use for your game absolutely. However, they are not so cheap, and it means for the indie development, it's not always reasonable to go for it. Here we have two free solutions as an indie developer for gathering the free assets with CCO license. It means it's a Creativity Commons license, and you can use it for your projects. One of them is 3D assets. That's one. It means in both in here you can search for the textures and models, but it's mainly useful for texture and HDRI maps. And also Polyhaven, that you can also use again for the HDRI maps, textures, and some high quality models. Both of these websites are totally free to use. Personally, I use, before the Quixel Megascans becomes free for Unreal, I use both of them for my projects. For the music and audio, it's not... personally, I did not find a good asset store that provides a free assets. There are some paid one that you can use, or using Unity or Unreal Engine as a paid asset stores. But there are also some free options. The picture that you see here is from Soundly app or software that it already contains some free audio or some free voices that you can take and even select a specific part of it and use in your game. But there are also some other websites that are included here, and yeah, you can consider them. Okay, the first part and our main discussion about asset gathering is finished here, because I didn't want to go too much into the depths of asset gathering, because I'm sure that you can find it yourself more interesting, and you can find the things that you need. But however, if you need any question, and we can discuss either here or afterwards. But let's dig into the asset creation topic, because it's a little bit bigger topic and it's very broad. In the 3D asset creation pipeline, you can divide it mainly into the 3 main steps. The first part is 3D model creation. Then you need to create your textures, and then you need to export it in game engine. In between, you may have, for example, the rigging, the UV unwrapping, that's I consider it as a part of the texturing, or some smaller steps. But these main categories are always common in all of the workflows. For the 3D models, you should first consider what's your type of the mesh that you're going towards it. Is it static mesh or is it skeletal mesh? The static mesh already provided in next slide, but yeah, we will return to the previous one. The static mesh is a type of the mesh that is fixed in your scene, and in more exact way, the distance between vertices is not changed using any rigs. And the skeletal mesh is a mesh that you can deform it, and the distance between vertices can be changed using the rigs that you defined for your model. Usually, skeletal mesh is used for the human or any robots that you have in your game, or anything that has animation in general. And the static mesh is considered for the most part of your scene that is static. They can even move, but they do not have internal animation. In the other word, their shape is not changed. When you consider the type of asset, the type of mesh that you would like to create, then you have different workflows. For example, you can go for the mesh-based or the polygon-based modeling. In that way, similar to if you open the Blender for the first time, you will see there is a cube, and it's a base cube or default cube, and you can start to make this cube to be similar to any other shapes by extruding, insetting, or other tools that you have. The other workflow is procedural workflow. That one of the most famous tools for it is Houdini. If you watch the Matrix Awakening video by Epix that's recently released for PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series, and also they released it as a free asset on Unreal Marketplace, they talked that how they create this city using Houdini. Using procedural workflows, they can create many assets using some simple ones and some structures. It provides lots of flexibility to your workflow. However, at the beginning, it's more time consuming than the mesh-based modeling. But when you plan to create lots of copies of one asset, or lots of assets with similarities and small differences to each other, it's reasonable. Also, recently, Blender introduced the geometry nodes that is doing somehow the same things. However, it's not comparable to Houdini, but it's doing the same approach. Also, if you go for the Unreal Engine, there is a geometry scripting topic in there that is using somehow the same approach to create or distribute the objects on the other objects. And the last one is sculpt-based modeling. That is the main workflow, maybe to create more artistic objects, or like human or a specific tree, that they add more freehand or more artistic approach into it. Usually, if you're not a 3D modeler or 3D sculptor, going for mesh-based modeling is not that much difficult. But going into the sculpting, it's another approach, and you need to learn a little bit more about the art and some fundamentals of it to be able to use it. When you prepare your model, then the things that give life to your model is textures. In order to use the textures, the first thing that you need to consider is UV unwrapping. You need to unwrap your model to be able to apply texture on it, at least in the most cases. This unwrap can be later used. You can also have another approach using triplanar mapping, but it's for some specific cases. After you unwrapped your model, you will export it into the texturing tool, or even if you're using Blender, you can use it internally, and you need to bake the maps. Even if you're using Unreal Engine and you have access to the nanite mesh, it means you do not need to reduce the number of vertices to be able to use it in your games. Map baking is very useful approach, because using that you can bake some information that does not exist in your model, or even if they are existing, you can add some additional information to them. For example, you can bake your map, your curvature, cavity or curvature map, to have the information about the curvature of your objects, and then apply a specific material at that part. When you have your map baked, you can either start to painting your texture if you already downloaded the textures that you want and you want to only join them together or merge them together somehow, or you can start to generating the textures. Texture generation is somehow a procedural workflow. Usually, you can also make a texture using Photoshop or other photo editing tool, but I'm talking about the procedural texture generation. That one of the famous tools in this case is Substance 3D Designer. Using some mathematical logic, you can create some textures. And this texture can be from the wood to any metal material, to any sci-fi idea, or even a very specific texture that looks like it's hand-painted, but it's already made using the procedural workflow. The benefit of these procedural workflows is you can modify the texture properties easily by some sliders or some values. It means you will create one procedural material and you can make several texture or several texture sets out of that and use it in different places in your game. Yeah, for example, you have a house that you would like to have different roofs for this house. And just changing the roof type by just sliding one variable. It's easily possible using the texture generation. The last part is texture painting, that you will export all of the textures that you have into the texture paintings tool like Substance Painter, and you will start to paint your texture on top of your 3D mesh. That we will go through these steps later. When you prepare all of your textures and static mesh, then you need to export them into the game engine. Inside the game engine, either you're using the default shader, that is not so common. You usually use the custom shaders. Either you need to create it or you will use the default one. But after that, you need to create the material using the texture that you already imported. And you will apply that material into your 3D model. It can, I can tell this workflow as a summary of the 3D asset creation pipeline. However, we will go into it in a little bit more depth, and I will show you how what's my approach using the Blender and other tools that I'm currently using. Also, I should mention, if you have skeletal mesh, you can animate your skeletal mesh using the Mixamo website. It's also by Adobe. I can quickly show this website also. The Mixamo website is a tool that you can import your 3D model in there. I think I need to refresh this website to see the animations. You can either use the default model by the Mixamo, or you can upload your character here. It's automatically rig your character, and then you can apply different animations that already exist in the Mixamo. They are very, very handy because they also have some pack of animations that you can use to create the whole animation for your game. And also, if you're using Unreal Engine and also new Unities, you are able to modify this animation afterwards and make them custom for your own work. You can. I also recommend to check this website and see the packages that are available. Okay, let's go into the first step, that is modeling. For the modeling, you have different options to choose, either going for commercial tools like Maya, Houdini, 3ds Max, 3D Codes, and for the sculpting approach, going for ZBrush, or one of the best free software in the world that I can say, it's Blender, that is totally comparable with many of these tools. I'm mentioning this because many of the free tools are not comparable with their commercial counterparts, but here the Blender is powerful enough to say that is changing the game. In this lecture, I will also go to Blender and use it, but you're free. If you're a student, you have access to the Maya and 3ds Max for free, I think for 3 years by Autodesk, if you go there. Also, Houdini has one free license. However, you cannot export from that license into any game engines or use them outside of the game engine. ZBrush has some offers for the students, but it's not free. Okay, we would like to start to check the workflow together. And in meanwhile, if you have any questions, you can ask me. We can pause and discuss something about it, because I would like to have this part of the presentation a little bit more interactive. As I mentioned, the presentation part is almost done, and from now we will mainly focus to see the tools and what we can do. As an example for this presentation, I search on the ArtStation website to see something that is simple and explainable in a short time. And I find this maybe artwork by Vitse Fopma, if I spell it correctly, but I put the link here, and you can check his work. It's a very interesting work. If you go to the ArtStation website, for example, for this guy, you can see he puts some drawing of his work from different angles and also some other type of assets. The first part that the first step that you should do for doing 3D modeling is gathering some references for your work. Here I'm using exactly this one and I'm just modeling it. But if you plan to make your own asset, you cannot just copy the model from somewhere. It means you should take the idea and create your own model and your own idea out of that. One of the tools that can be very helpful in this case is PureRef tool. It's just reference manager. It's a very simple tool. When you open it, you can click and drag from any image, and it will add it here. It's very handy to collect several images and make a collage of them. It's also handy to check, to compare the assets together, and also always have something as a reference when you are working, because you can make it on top of the other windows. And as you see, it doesn't have any menu or any specific area that lose the space that you need. It's very clean and useful tool. You can gather the assets and start to think about what structures is important for you. For today, I consider that we are planning to exactly model this asset. It means we have one reference for it. The first step that we need to do afterwards is opening our tool and maybe just think about how we want to model it, what will be our approach towards it. I will open the Blender, and as you see, it's like always, it's a default cube. I will just remove, and from the picture that I already saw there, I will just drag and drop inside the Blender. It's exactly the picture that we have. Just if you rotate your scene, you will see it's not in the correct position. I recommend always to put it in a 0-0 condition and just rotate it towards your front view. One of the important points when you are thinking about asset creation, it's what's the size of the assets. Either you're making the epic game, very big game, or a very adventure game that even have very unusual size of assets. But you should have it in your mind before starting the creation of your asset. Otherwise, it makes some difficulties afterwards. For example, I expect that this axe is somehow a big axe and it's about 1 meter of length. It means if I add my cube and check the size of the cube, it's 2 by 2. If I reduce it to 1 by 1, I can expect that this axe should fit into these sides. As a first step, I recommend always to scale it somehow to have even your reference in the size that you need. The next thing that you can do is find out what's the main, because we are not going for the sculpt-based modeling, we are starting almost from the mesh-based modeling. We will add the sculpting into it a little bit, but yeah, we are starting from the mesh-based modeling. We should think what's the base mesh for each part of this asset. I will grab my tablet to draw something for you to make it easier to see. Okay. Yeah. Let me fit it here. Yeah, perfect. As you can see, we have some objects that can help us to understand what's the structure of these assets. For example, here, as you can see, it's an object that somehow is similar to a cylinder. And this object is already continued towards the rest of the shape until this point. It means the base shape of our mesh can be a cylinder, and it's going upward toward this location and until here. It makes our work much simpler because we are somehow sure what's the main mesh that we need. The next part that we have is the bottom part. It's also a cylindrical shape. But if you consider a cylinder, it's converted from cylinder into something a little bit inclined. It means if I go step by step, if it's the cylinder, then maybe it breaks into this shape. Then it's smoothed like this. And the cap of it is converted into something like shape of the maybe tooth of dragon or something like that. If you go on top, you will see some details like this, maybe leather parts. I expect that this part comes inside the detail that I will add later. I do not need to model it exactly, or even if I model it, I do not need to implement it as a game object later. I can apply it as a texture. It's much more performant, and it's also somehow simpler to achieve. If you go top, you will see this part. It's not similar to the rest it's somehow very sharp. It has some sharp edges. It means it's somehow coming from a cube. And it's very simple because when you have a cube, you can bevel the corners and make it similar to this. It means we have one shape as a cylinder, the first shape, and one shape as a cube. The next part is this shape that is going in these directions. This shape can be done either using a cube, because we expect that is started from the cubic shape, something like this, or you can manually make this shape by adding some points on different area of this shape. And make mesh out of that. Okay, now we know what's our shape is built out. Also, I should mention, if you like to have also details like this, you can add them. They are the same approach, but it depends on your game, whether you want to go for such these small details or not. When you add them, you need to add also some rigs to it to make it animatable and yeah, make it swinging when you're moving this asset. As an example for our work, just imagine that I would like to have this main body. How should I create it? As I mentioned, it's a cylinder. It means if we have a cylinder and we rotate it a little bit to fit, it should somehow fit our shape. And then we can easily start to make our shape out of that. Do not worry if your shape is edgy at the beginning. You can always fix such these things later. It's only about getting the main concept of this work and the main workflow. If some parts of your shape thing needs the bigger thickness or needs any modification, you can easily later add to it. And if you find that this part is already very sharp because the main shape is very smooth, you can easily bevel it, and by adding some bevels, you can see we have a smooth curvature in there, and we already have the main shape of our objects. Or again, if we are thinking about the top part, as I mentioned, it's a cube. You can easily create it by just scaling one cube, put it in the correct location, and like this, scale it a little bit. Then one of the things that I like to also mention, if you have a cube that doesn't have the scale as a one, always fix that scale, because it's one of the issues that you're always encountering also when you are exporting your models later. You can select then the edges. And bevel them. In this way, we have somehow the shape that we want for that part. Absolutely, I'm not making exactly the shape. I will show you afterward the results, but I would like to tell that's what's the concept behind the creating such a this shape. And the third workflow, it's you have one shape that you would like to create exactly. In this way, I will start with one simple plane. I will go to the editing and remove all of the vertices and just keep one. And then from this one vertex, I will start to make the shape that I want. Again, when the shape is not precise, it doesn't matter, because the only things that is important here is how to connect your shape together. When you finish it, you can fill it and then start to extrude your fill, and according to the shape that you have, then you can bevel it to have some detail. like the details that already exist in there and add more details into it afterwards. And as a last part, only to show how you can make such a this shape, it's again a cylinder. You will scale it down somewhere that is comparable. And first start to move it in a place that you think it's reasonable, then adding some detail into it, move it toward the location you want, adding a bevel to make it curved, and then the tip of it, you can make it smooth. If you find that that is not working, just you can go back a little bit, make it smaller, somehow fits this area, make it bevel first, and then wait for this part. Yeah. We can easily make our model. I already prepared the model in a more appropriate way. I will open that model and I will continue from that one. Okay, I exactly followed the workflow that I mentioned, and I created this simple mesh. It means we already did our blackout, and then we modified it to reach to the low poly mesh. We can call this mesh as a low poly one. This low poly mesh is a good base for adding more detail and also doing the UV unwrapping for our model. The detail can be added either as a sculpting. For example, I will take this part of the mesh, or let me just, yeah, I will take this part of the mesh, duplicate, and go to the sculpting mode. Let me just see. Yeah. Let me check why it's deactivated. Let me, yeah, it's better to work here to avoid any problems that we have there. As you see, it has, it doesn't have so many polygons, but when we go into the sculpting environment for it, we can modify it according to our needs. The first step is usually in the sculpt procedure is adding a little bit more detail. I'm voxelizing it for now to have a quick workflow. I will check the number of things and make it something like this. As you can see, it's a little bit more detailed, but it's not enough for us. I will make it more detailed by reducing size of the voxels. And you see we have more detailed mesh. And using, in this case, it's better to use the digital drawing tablets, and you can add the detail into your model. It's the first approach that is sculpting. Also, in addition to the sculpting, you can add detail to your model using additional objects. For example, I will deactivate the low poly model and activate the high poly one. Here, I added the detail into this model by sculpting some parts of the wood into it, and also adding that leather part as a separated object in this area. The benefit of this separated object is we can easily bake it later into the base mesh and have almost the same shape inside our game. Okay, you have your high poly mesh, with more details, and you have your low poly one. The next step is to do the UV unwrapping here. UV unwrapping is a procedure of converting your model into your 3D model into the 2D space. Because the texture that you have is a 2D space, it's in 2D space, and you would like to apply it into the 3D space, it's not possible. It should you should either convert the 2D textures into the 3D one, or the 3D model into the 2D space area. That is the common ways from the 3D model into the 2D space area, and you will do the UV unwrapping for this reason. For example, you would like to do the UV unwrapping for this part. You need to define some cuts into your model. If I go to the UV editing, you need to define some cuts in your model that will cut the mesh into the two parts, like the things that we do with the scissors and convert a box or maybe cube into some smaller squares. When you cut your model using the seams, then you can do the UV unwrapping by pressing in Blender, it's pressing U, and make an unwrapped version of it here. By taking all of the objects that you have and do the UV unwrapping for them, sometimes it's more difficult for different objects, but yeah, you can check a little bit the workflow of doing the UV unwrapping and find out what's the appropriate way for it. For example, as a quick hint is any sharp edges that can distinct between the different part of the objects can be a good candidate for the seam, or cylinders always need one vertical seams, and it should be in a place that is almost hidden, that is not visible that much. If you have one part of your model that is going inside another one, it's a good area to already apply the seam. It's also another thing. But when you add all of the UVs that you already created for each object, then you need to pack them together to already contain them in either one UV sets or more than one UV sets. It depends on your workflow. For example, we have the UDIM workflow, and it means you have several UV sets with different size for one or more objects. That is using in movie industries, and recently is also more used in the game industries. But here I plan to have all of them in one UV set. In this case, either you can use in Blender, there is a packing solution, or there are also some free plugins for Blender. One of them is called UV Packer that I use it here. By pressing the pack button, it will start to calculate. I will just move one of, let me select this one. I will just move some of these objects in a random place to see the influence of the packing. When you pack them, it starts to move them in and pack them into the one square-shaped texture area that will be used for the texturing later. After you finalize your model and your UV, you need to export them and start the texturing procedure. Here, I would like to add only one quick comments that usually I see that people has problem with it. First of all, if you have your model, always go to the edit mode, press M and merge the vertices by distance. For me, it's right 0 vertices because I do not have a duplicated vertices. But it's very common that you have duplicated vertices in your model, absolutely when you're just starting to do the 3D modeling or you are just modifying something. Always remove them because they make some problems. The next point is the face orientation. It means the normal direction of each face should looks outward. Otherwise, when you export it to the game engine and you are using one-sided materials, you do not see that mesh. I can show you in this way. If you have one object and just mirror it, yeah, it's don't matter. That's let me just join them together to have the better mirror shape. It's also very common that you have a mirror version of your object. When you apply the scale, you can see that it's becoming red. It means all of the normals are looking inward instead of looking outward. And it will make a huge problem for you. Just select your object, go to edit mode and press and you can press Shift N easily to recalculate the normals and make your objects working again. If you have this condition, always check your objects for the inward normals. Okay, I will select my object, file, export. Here I'm exporting as a FBX, but you have also options to export as an object file or a GLTF that is recently also supporting by the engines. And you can export it somewhere on your computer. Also, you can use the selected objects and apply transform. If you are using Unity as a game engine, I highly recommend to use the asset that is called Asset Creation Toolset or Toolkit. It's a plugin. It's a free plugin for Blender. That I can show you the full name here. Asset Creation Toolset. It's very handy asset, and it gives you lots of options for export. But the main reason that I'm using it, because when I see it several times that you are trying to export your model into Unity, and you will see some part of your model is rotated, or the scale is not correct, or it has some problems, or you have several objects that you would like to export them one by one as a separated mesh. All of these options are possible by Asset Creation Toolset, and I highly recommend this one. Okay, I think it's enough from the Blender aspect. Let's go to the texturing tool. Our texturing tool here is Substance Painter. It's not a free tool, but if you're a student, you can, at least up to now, I think you can use it. I'm not sure in the future whether Adobe will change their policies for it, but yeah, currently I think you can use it for free. However, you need to go to the Substance 3D website, not the Adobe website, to get the free license. And also, if you are planning a little bit more seriously for the game development, I recommend to have this tool as one of the commercially or industrial standard tool inside your package. You do not need to buy the Maya, but somehow you need to buy Substance Painter. It provides lots of benefits to your work, and it's totally changed the feeling and the quality of your work. It doesn't matter that you're going for the realistic games or for the very simple game approach, or for the stylized or low poly game approach, I mean. Substance Painter is importing your model and can apply different textures that you are already. For example, you can download a texture from the Quixel Mega Scans. I can also quickly show you. You can download the texture from some websites or Quixel Mega Scans, and then you can use them inside the Substance Painter. For example, I have here this texture that I downloaded. Doesn't have any relation to the model that we have, but it's fun. And I will grab the texture files that is coming with it. For example, it has albedo, ambient occlusion, displacement, normal map, and roughness. I will import them in Substance Painter and import all of them as a texture for this project. When you have them, you can easily select. You can easily create a new folder for it and add a material. Here, sorry, head. I should add it to the head. Create a material. And for this material, you can start to assign the data that you have, for example, like this. And roughness and normal map. As you can see, we already created our material. We can later save our material to use later. We can change the scale and other option. We can also maybe map it to our model using the triplanar mapping. That is not depends on the UVs. It depends on the board position. However, it will save later on the UVs, but from the projection aspect, it's not depends on UV. Or you can even, for example, use a spherical projection. That is also good for such a disk shape because it's somehow spherical, and many other tools. But the benefits of Substance Painter is not assigning a texture, is creating special texture for your model according to its information. I will show you what I mean by importing the model that we already exported. And I will discard the changes here. It's the X that we exported. I will quickly just enable anti-aliasing to make a smoother edges. It's the X, and it's not so nice. It's just a white object. But if we go to the project, if we go to the mesh baking part, and we import the high poly version that we have as a higher detail, we can now bake the detail from the higher poly version into the lower poly one. It means we can easily have all of the details that we already included using either sculpting or additional geometry into our model without additional cost. In Substance Painter, there are different maps that is created. For example, there's ID map that's not useful here. There's ambient occlusion map that is somehow adding the detail of shadows in the area of contact of two objects together. And immediately it adds lots of more details into our shape. The curvature that shows which part of our mesh is already curved or has a change in the curvature. The position, the thickness that shows, for example, for this part or this skeletal part is very important because it can create a very nice gradient between the part that has more thickness and the less thickness. And absolutely the normal map that will give a detail of the surface into our low poly model. If you're familiar with some tools like Photoshop, the structure in the Substance Painter is very similar. You are not creating everything in some layers, and always the top layer has higher priority than the lower layer unless you define some blending options. For example, I can come here and take one material like this wood and assign it to my objects. It will be assigned there. I have different projections, very similar to the things that I showed you before, that they will very nicely projected into the shape. But also I can add another layer on top of that. Now this layer is totally override the previous layer. But if I add a mask similar to what we have in the Photoshop and start to painting something on this mask, for example, I will go to the brushes that we have here and just choose some dirt brush and start to painting. I can add some details into this part. Yeah. But even this one is not enough for the productive workflow and adding detail using the maps. We need to have some procedurally things that happen or automatically generated things. For example, one of the materials that I really like is this plastic dusty. If I assign it, it will take the information from my ambient occlusion and curvature map to create some dust on my objects. Immediately, it will add lots of detail to my model. I do not need to exactly use this object. I can take, for example, the dust part of it and the dirt edges and just add another material underneath. Now I have the information of the dust and dirt edges in addition to the another material. And it will gives me lots of power to change the things, the feeling in my objects. Also, one of the new updates in Substance Painter, I think since last year, January 2021, you can now also select that which part should take this information. For example, I would like to only have it for the top part and maybe just top parts. Yeah, I can select and that part, and the rest of my object is not taking that information. And now I can easily assign what wood material to the body of my object. And again, I would like to have it only for this part. I will only assign it to that part. Or I would like to have some leather, maybe this kind of leather for this part. It's already applied to the whole of it, but I do not like it. I will only apply it to this part of my material, but it's not also again correct because I would like to have it only for the top part. I will add a black mask to it, easily go to the polygon selection, and I will select all of the polygons that should take this material. Now, if I return, I will see I have all of this information here. Or there is, I think, a creature piece that I think is a good fit for the bottom part. And it's immediately adds lots of feeling to your objects. And as a last example, I will just add something metallic to the metallic part of my objects. Now look at your object and compare it with the things that was before. It's totally believable now. In Substance Painter, you have also some options for rendering. Absolutely, it's not a rendering tool. It's not a best rendering options that you can get in comparison to the other tools, but it's good if you sometimes want to have an idea for your object, how does it look with a higher quality rendering. When you finish your work in Substance Painter, you need to export. You can export your mesh as well. Sometimes it makes difference to export it or either use the already existing mesh. But the important point is you need to export the textures. The textures can be exported by different templates. For example, I will export this texture as an Unreal Engine 4 template because it has all of the maps that I want: the base color, roughness, metallicness, ambient occlusion map, normal map, and emissive map. And also you have the size of your texture. Usually I will use the 4K as a exporting option, and I will make my texture based on that. We can even go higher, but yeah, usually I think 4K for the indie games or the personal games is enough. And you can press export and take your asset. I already created let me open the file that I created. It's here. I already created one asset. I will show you quickly, and I will show you the resulting textures. I added also some post-processing effect. That's not anything special, but yeah, it's add a little bit more interesting look. Also, as you can see, I added some detail by hand on some parts of it to give it like a crafted weapon, or adding some damage parts. All of this is with the same approach and same structure as a layer workflow. Okay, just imagine that I exported this one, and the exported texture will look like this. It's for base color, the emissive channel that I will show you what's the usage of it, or you can also merge this emissive channel with the base color if you want as an alpha layer of your base color, because our object is opaque and doesn't have any transparency layer. You can use the alpha channel of that one for this. The normal map and occlusion, roughness, metallicness map. This map by itself is not usable, but we will split this map into the structure to be able to use it, and I will show you later how. Just imagine we have these three maps, and we have also our model. I will again export my model. to make sure that I'm using the same model as here. And I will open my game engine. Here I will show the workflow for the Unreal game engine, but you can also use it for the Unity game engine. It's almost similar. Just you should know that if you are not using a scriptable rendering pipeline, you do not have access to the shader graph, and either you need to use another asset or write your own shader or export your asset for that a specific shader in Unity for the standard rendering pipeline. Here in Unreal, I will create one folder for my X. And I will import the X that I exported. It will ask me for some information. I can build nanites, absolutely. And I need to combine the meshes because I would like to have it as one object. As you can see, my model is here without any textures. Reduce the speed of this one. We have more controls. Yeah, that's right. Okay, I will also add now the textures that I have. And according to this texture, I will create one material. Underline X. The material and the workflow is similar to the shader graph. If you're familiar with the shader graph in Unity, you have some channels and you have some information regarding to your specific base shader and material domain that is here for us is surface and it's opaque. And you need to assign the information into it. For example, the first information that we have is a base color texture that we can connect. And as you see on the surface, it's something weird because the UV on this surface is not same as our model. The next things that I will add is a normal map that I can directly connect it. The next one will be ambient occlusion, roughness, and metallicness. As I mentioned, it consists of 3 maps. It means the red channel is ambient occlusion, the green channel is roughness, and the blue channel is metallicness. Like this, very easily. And you can see the shape of our material is already changed and it's reflecting. For example, later on, if you would like to change the roughness, I can show you also how to do it quickly. But the next channel that we have is emissive color. This emission I would like to have, if you take a look at our model, I have very small area here that I would like to make it blinking or make it to create a light a little bit or the shape of the light, something like that. If you remember, for example, in movies like Lord of the Ring, the sword of Frodo can be light up when there are enemies in nearby, and it's the same approach. You can do it here. We have our texture for the emission color. If I multiply this texture by a color, convert to parameter and call it color. For example, I will make it for now a blue color. It's better to color emission color. And then if I multiply it again, emission power, connect it into my emissive color channel, where we can see later the influence. I will save this material. I will create one material instance out of that and assign it to my model. Okay, that's it. You created your model and you texture it, and now you have it inside the game engine with all of the details that you already exported. But how about the emission? We deactivate the emission by ourselves. I will move it here. And as you can see, we have the emissive power here. When I increase it, you can add the light into it, and you can change the color. It means if you're writing a script, then you can modify these parameters using your script and easily creating some gameful part for your game that is interactive when it's reaching to the certain area. Or if you find out that is not reflective enough your model, you can also increase the reflections by multiplying and powering up the values. But I think it's out of the time of the 2 days presentation. I will probably stop the lecture right here. If you have any other question, I would like to answer them. Feel free to discuss. I hope it was useful for you, and yeah, we learned together something.
Thank you, Saeed. That was really like detailed, and you went through really like into like details and went through like whole pipeline. And yeah, you can wait for like some questions and see if anything pops up. And I think we have few of them. So the first one is this one.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm using the Substance Painter for baking. If you're going to the more professional, maybe the workflows, they are even using another tool for baking and then export it to Substance Painter. The Marmoset toolbag, if I can search it quickly, Marmoset toolbag is one of the famous tools for baking. However, for the indie development, it's not reasonable to buy all of these tools at the same time. I recommend the Substance Painter because it's using, if you have RTX graphic cards, it's using the RTX power to bake the textures much faster than Blender. But at the end, you can use the Blender for baking the texture. It's a little bit slower, more time consuming, and just imagine that you're developing a game that has 20 assets or 30 assets. If it takes 10 minutes for each baking in comparison to the 1 minute for Substance Painter, it means you're losing 300 minutes. And just a little bit comparison, 300 minutes, if each minute for you is maybe costing 10 cents, you can compare a little bit from the commercial aspect whether it's worth it or not. Also, the license that I have for my Substance Painter is by Steam. It's it's not a limited license or the monthly license is perpetual license. It's cost, I think, about 120 euros. That is somehow acceptable. It's some general information about the financial part if you are interested in.
Okay, thank you for the answer. And the next one is this one.
Okay. Can you explain a little bit more? Because I do not get what do you mean about unwrap 2D texture.
I think he can like elaborate later, and we can move to the next one, and then we can go back to this question. Because I think it's a little bit delay like between the streams.
Oh yeah,
so sure. Go to this one.
Yeah, how is it to transfer from working in Unity to Unreal? One of the things that I would like to tell all of the Unity users, first of all, I'm an Unreal fan. All of my comments are a little bit biased. You should consider this. But I have my own reasons to be an Unreal fan. And I think it's very simple. First of all, for the artist is very, very simple. And they have much more tools to use in Unreal. For the programmers, it's also acceptable, but they should consider some points. First of all, their approach towards the blueprints is a little bit different to the approach towards the prefabs. The nested prefabs in Unity is working differently than nested blueprints in Unreal. It's one of the main things that you should consider. Otherwise, for the rest of your projects, either for the actors, for example, the actors is representative of game objects in Unity, and everything inherited from actors, like a pawns, like a character. I'm talking about the classes in Unreal. Maybe I can show you quickly here. When you create, I'm creating a class, the actor is a game object, the pawn character, and everything after that is inherited class. It means if you want to stick into Unity, you can start even simply by actor and do everything in actor without going to any other classes. But Unreal is providing you more simpler solution for example, creating character that can walk. It means at the start, you need a little bit of converting knowledge, but in general, it's very simple. I was also a Unity user and then go to Unreal. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And maybe one like sub question, like what would you suggest like as materials to like maybe transition or like to learn from it? I know that Unreal has like some documentation like for users like how to switch from Unity to Unreal, but are there maybe like some channels or like some other documentations that helped you?
On YouTube, you can find some, I cannot tell you exactly the link, but I checked before. On YouTube, you can find some videos related to the Unreal for Unity users. They will explain these topics in more details. But as you mentioned, one of the best sources is Unreal Manual, because they have specifically one topic for the Unity users that wants to transfer their game into the Unreal Engine.
Okay, perfect. And now we can return to this question about painting directly on 2D, and we had some more explanation. So this is the follow-up. And
the point is your UV shape is not always a rectangular shape. Maybe I can show you here if it's open.
And just maybe before we start, there's also like this follow-up that you could open a JPEG image, for example, in Photoshop and paint directly.
Yeah, I'm exactly answering this one because all of them are connected together.
Perfect.
You see, this shape is already all the different parts of this shape is not in the rectangular shape. It means sometimes when you start to painting on them, the shape that you're painting is not according to the shape on the actual objects, and it makes it much more difficult to paint. It's not recommended to do this unless you have a very specific shape that you are sure that, for example, I know that this part of my axe is exactly coming from the main shape of the axe. And if I paint something here, it will replicate it exactly on the axe. But for the other parts, it's not that much easy, and it will change the shape. It will change your drawing when you draw something here, and you will see. Maybe I can even show you. I'm not sure whether it's I can easily show, but I will try my best to show you something here. It's exactly that UV unwrap that you see there. I will add one layer here. I need to also reduce the resolution of this one. To be able to work faster. Yeah. Okay. I will add a red color into it to be able to just show. Yeah. It's your texture and you would like to paint something on it. I will draw something like this. And when you go to your shape, you can see it's coming from this part of your axe to the other side. It's much bigger than this shape. And if you try to maybe apply one shape on it, you will see you will have some problems. However, if you start to do it exactly on the 3D surface, you can always make sure that it's exactly projected on the mesh. And about the other question regarding to the legally using these assets, theoretically, I do not recommend it because I'm exactly replicating that object. If you modify it yourself and a little bit, you should be able to use it. But from the legal aspect, I'm not a lawyer, and yeah, you can ask from the lawyers more specifically that part.
Okay. And next question is about gathering assets.
My plan is to buy some songs to use, but this would make it harder for YouTuber to show my games. How can I mitigate this issue? Is there a good alternatives? I'm not sure about the YouTube workflow because, for example, for our game, we are creating our musics and it doesn't make this problem because it's already created for the game. But I'm not sure when you buy the music that has some license, whether YouTube makes a problem or not. Sorry, I'm not sure about this one.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, these are really like more kind of like a legal legal stuff.
For the legal things.
Yeah, I think that could also be like one of the lectures, maybe in the next iteration, like that could be like just how you do it like legal with the copyrights, IP law, and so on. Okay, and next question.
Okay, yeah. How would you recommend one starts learning asset optimization, texture size, poly counts, audio compression, etc.? First of all, if it depends on the game engine that you're using, and inside the game engine, what's the pipeline that you're using? I will explain it this way. If you're using Unity, it means the poly count is important. The optimization in Unity depends on several different topics. Some parts of it is coming from the poly count, the other part is coming from the batches and the textures and several things more. You can consider your object as a static object. It means if you have some static objects that are not moving, it means you can improve the performance by making them static inside the Unity. But if you do not reduce the number of polygons for your static object inside the Unity, after playing your game, you will see lots of batches that is created because Unity is limited by number of the polygons per batches. It means at the end, as a summary, number of polygons in Unity is important. Try to first reduce number of polygons as much as possible. I can show some quick tips for reducing polygons. For example, you have this X here. I will remove the image. You have this X here, and this part of the X is going into the another part. Absolutely, you do not need this face anymore. Why one face is important? For two reasons. First of all, it's a cylindrical face. It means it's creating about 16 polygons or 10 polygons for one face. Second, this face is taking an area inside the UV unwrap that later you have. It means once area of your UV is already captured by the parts that nobody can see it. And you will have less space for the rest of your UV. It means you need the higher resolution for your texture to reach to the same quality. In the more appropriate, maybe more explanatory way, if you have one cube as a wall in your game, I will make it also a little bit more interesting always. Just imagine that you have the wall that has some parts on the bottom that's coming out. And the users only can see it from these three faces, either here or front or this part. You should absolutely remove this face because it's taking a huge amount of UV because it's almost as big as the front face. It's somehow answering the texture size question. If you remove the unnecessary polygons, you can use the lower texture size for your later texture painted asset. But what's the importance of the texture size? Texture size is taking the GPU memory. It means you can, if you are using the higher texture size, you can easily reach the cap of your GPU memory. And after that, the GPU doesn't have enough memory to load the next textures. Either you should reduce the resolution of your textures. For example, in Unreal, if you open the textures, you have the options here to, where is it? I should find it. You have the mip-map option about mip-map files, and also you will have options for defining the size of the texture that is currently this size. Inside the Unity, you can also reduce the texture size in the same way to have the lower resolution or a smaller one, or using the better compression to reduce the memory used by each texture. But the other solution that you have is a virtual texturing or virtual texture streaming. It means it will divide your map into the smaller chunks, and each chunks that is more near to the camera will render with higher resolution, and the chunks further will render with lower resolution. In this way, you are also fixing the texture load problem. But in general, as a summary of the whole discussion, first, try to reduce the polygon. Second, try to reduce the polygon. And third, think about the texture. And if you are going for the Unreal, you have the Nanite solution that you will get rid of the batches, draw calls, polygon counts. However, for now, it has some limitation. You cannot use it for VR. You cannot use it in the current version. You cannot use it for the transparent object or foliage. However, I heard that the next release, 5.1 probably, that will be not so far away, will have the foliage and transparent option also for Nanite. It means it also depends on your game engine.
Okay, and do you maybe have any tips about audio, like compression, or?
Honestly, I'm not an audio expert for the compression.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm mainly for the asset, for the 3D asset parts. I know the audio is also an asset, but that's my expertise.
No, I'm just asking because you went here into really a lot of details, a lot of really good tips where to start, and okay. We're gonna wait a few more minutes, and in between, maybe you can also repeat what's the next homework for them for this week.
Maybe I can quickly also overview the tools that they have for texturing, because I didn't go into this part. As I mentioned, the Blender, in addition to the modeling, it has also the texture painting and texture baking part. It's not perfect, but it's free. Substance Painter and Substance Designer are the industrial standard solution for creating textures and painting textures. Mari 3D Code and also Armor Paint is another solution. Armor Paint is recently released. It's not that much powerful, but it's an open source tool, and I think it's about $20 or something like this. It's not that much expensive. Also, Quixel has one solution called Quixel Mixer that is comparable to Substance Painter. It has lots of features. It's also free. I highly recommend to go for it. The only problem is it doesn't have the baker internally up to this point. Maybe later they will add. But they do not have a baker. It means you should bake the texture in Blender and then export in Quixel. But for the rest, Quixel is very powerful. As assignment, I would recommend that you find relevant assets for your project, either 3D object, sound, or visual effects, and then try to implement them inside your project. Also, try to find references for some custom assets. Try to search either ArtStation or Divine Arts or somewhere else, or even Pinterest. For some sources or ideas for the assets, try to convert them into the idea for yourself, and using that one, try to make some custom assets. They do not need to be perfect, just test them. test. If you do one time the asset yourself, you will have enough confidence to modify others' assets and also improve your own assets. And yeah, something that's as a maybe last hint I find when people doing the 3D modeling. If you press some button on the keyboard and you do not see anything happening on the computer, it doesn't mean that any changes has happened. It's already happened, but you do not see. Please always use Ctrl-Z. I'm telling it, it's very simple and maybe very obvious, but I have always this problem in all of my courses with the students that, yeah, they think that when they press something and nothing is visible, it means nothing happens. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Saeed. And yeah, this homework will be until Saturday, and you can find like links for the Discord and our website down in the description. And yeah, we see each other like next week, same time. We're gonna go over vertical slice, and Brin's gonna talk more about vertical slices. And again, thanks again, Said, for like really like in depth and like whole overview of asset creation. And I was really glad to have you on this lecture. And with this, we're gonna end this week's lecture and see you next week.
Thank you so much. See you, everyone. Bye.